My parents called me a parasite in front of everyone, so I walked out and cut them off cold. I stood there, fork frozen midair, as my dad's voice sliced through the chatter at my uncle's birthday dinner. "You've been a burden since the day you were born, Nathan Carter." The room went graveyard quiet. My mom nodded. Her face twisted like she'd bitten a lemon. "You're lucky we even let you live with us," she spat. I blinked, my pulse hammering. This was really happening right now in front of relatives I hadn't seen in years at a damn family party. We were at my Uncle Greg's house, plates piled with barbecue, cousins laughing over old stories. I'd been feeling okay for once, like I belonged. Then my parents decided it was the perfect time to gut me publicly. I wasn't some freeloader crashing on their couch. For 6 years, I'd paid rent to live in their spare room. Their own son shelling out $800 a month, while my sister Sophie got to stay for free. I covered their internet, electricity, even part of their mortgage. 6 years of propping up their lives, and now they were painting me as a leech. I should have seen it coming. Growing up, I was always the scapegoat. If they were strapped for cash, it was because I cost too much. If they were stressed, I was the problem child. Meanwhile, Sophie was their golden girl, responsible, perfect, never a burden. As a kid, I'd lie awake wondering why I was never enough. But this was a new low. Dad kept going, his face, red veins bulging. "Do you know how much stress you've caused us? We've had to worry about you constantly. Sophie makes good choices. You're just dead weight." I glanced at Sophie. She was scrolling her phone, sipping her drink, acting like this wasn't happening. My Aunt Lisa shifted uncomfortably, but no one said a word. The silence burned. I set my fork down, slow and deliberate. My hands shook, not with hurt, but with something hotter, rage, pure and sharp. I looked at Sophie, then Dad, and forced a smile. "Okay," I said, voice steady. Then I pushed my chair back and walked out of the dining room. Behind me, I heard Uncle Greg mutter, "That was too far," and Aunt Lisa trying to hush my parents, but Dad was still ranting about my ingratitude. I didn't care anymore. I stormed to my room, the one I paid for, and yanked my suitcase from under the bed. My mind was racing, but one thought cut through. I don't have to take this. Not anymore. I packed like a man, possessed, clothes, laptop, toothbrush. 10 minutes in and out. I could buy the rest later. As I zipped the bag, Mom yelled my name from the hallway. "Nathan." I ignored her. I slung the bag over my shoulder, marched past her, down the stairs, and straight through the dining room where Dad was still arguing with Uncle Greg. He spun when he saw me. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" I didn't answer. I walked out the front door, got in my car, and peeled away. The rearview mirror showed their house shrinking, and for the first time in years, I felt my chest loosen. A few hours later, I was in a cramped studio apartment I'd found online. Bare walls, creaky floor, but it was mine. No screaming, no guilt trips, just quiet. My phone buzzed. Mom. Her text was short. "Don't come back." I stared at it, my thumb hovering. Part of me wanted to fire back something nasty, but I just typed, "Okay." Then I did something I'd never dared before. I logged into my accounts and canceled every payment tied to them: internet, electricity, mortgage. Gone. I hit record on a voice message, my voice calm but steel cold. "I've paid your bills for 6 years. You told me to leave, so I'm gone. I'm not covering anything anymore. Good luck." I sent it and shut off my phone. I lay back on the lumpy mattress, staring at the ceiling. Free. I was finally free. But as I drifted off, a small voice in my head whispered, "You have no idea how bad this is going to get us." I woke up to my phone blowing up, 73 missed calls, a full voicemail, and texts screaming I'd ruined their lives. Morning light leaked through the cheap blinds of my studio. I grabbed my phone, half expecting a stray notification, but the screen was chaos. 50 calls from Mom, 20 from Dad, a few from Sophie, even some from Aunt Lisa. Voicemails maxed out, texts stacked so deep I had to scroll. My gut twisted as I skimmed them. "You ungrateful brat, you can't do this," from Dad. "We raised you, fed you, and this is how you repay us," from Mom. "Your dad's shaking, he's so stressed. Just talk to us," she added, like I'd fall for the guilt trip again. Then Aunt Lisa, Nathan, they're in panic mode. "Call me. Cousin Jake, dude, they're freaking out trying to find you." I froze at Sophie's text. "They're pulling your credit reports. Be careful." Credit reports. My heart thudded. Back when I lived with them, they had access to my mail bank statements, old bills. Even my social security number from when they helped set up my accounts as a teen. If they were digging into my finances, they weren't just mad. They were hunting for leverage. I flashed back to age 16, Mom hovering as I signed up for my first credit card, her smile too sharp. "We'll keep an eye on it," she'd said. Now I saw it control, not care. I shot Sophie a text. "What the hell do you mean credit reports?" she replied fast. "Mom asked for your SSN last night." I said I didn't know it, but she's digging through your old mail. "Think they want your bank info?" My stomach lurched. They weren't trying to fix things, they wanted to see how much I had left, maybe even bleed me dry. I'd been their ATM for years. Cutting them off must have felt like betrayal. Big mistake. I texted Sophie. "Tell them to back off." 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom. I don't know why I answered. Curiosity? Or maybe I wanted to hear her squirm. Her voice exploded. "Where the hell are you, Nathan?" I yanked the phone from my ear. "How dare you cut us off? You owe us." I stayed silent, letting her rage. "You know what you've done. We can't pay our bills because of you." There it was, the real reason. Not love, not family, money. I'd been propping up their lifestyle and now the plug was pulled. I finally spoke, voice low. "You told me to leave. I'm doing what you asked." Silence. Then her tone flipped syrupy and fake. "Honey, let's work this out. Where are you? We'll come talk." I almost laughed. "No," her voice hardened. "You think you're clever, we'll find you." Click. I hung up my hands, shaking. That wasn't normal. That was desperate. Sophie texted Mom and Dad just left. "They're trying to find you." My pulse spiked. "How?" "They don't know my address," her reply. "They've got your old mail. They know your area." Mom was on the phone with someone. "Think they hired a PI." "A private investigator." My mind raced. Were they that unhinged? I glanced at my locked door, the closed blinds. Suddenly, my safe haven felt like a trap. I bolted to the bank, my car screeching into the lot. At the counter, I demanded to update my address, security questions, everything. "Has anyone tried accessing my account?" The teller typed, then frowned. "Someone called yesterday claiming to be you. Asked for your balance. We denied them, wrong security answers." My blood ran cold. It was them. I changed passwords, added two-factor authentication, set up fraud alerts. As I left, my phone buzzed Mom again. I ignored it. Then a text. "We're close." Close. My eyes darted around the parking lot. Nothing. Then another buzz, a photo. My car, blurry, parked right where I stood. My heart slammed against my ribs. They'd found me. I was staring at a photo of my car on my phone, my parents tracking me like I was prey. My hands shook as I scanned the bank parking lot. No sign of them, but that blurry shot of my sedan meant someone was close, too close. I shoved my phone in my pocket and speed walked to my car, locking the doors the second I slid inside. My pulse was a drumbeat. How the hell did they find me so fast? I started the engine, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Then I saw it, a black SUV idling at the lot's edge. The second I pulled out, it followed. I gripped the wheel, forcing myself to breathe. "Stay calm, Nathan." I made a few random turns, testing them. The SUV stuck to me like glue. Sophie's last text burned in my mind. They hired a PI. Were my parents that desperate? I thought back to all the times they'd guilted me into paying their bills, their voices dripping with entitlement. Family helps family, Dad would say, but it was always a one-way street. Now I'd cut them off and they were hunting me to drag me back. My phone buzzed. "Dad. Come home now and we'll forget this happened. Keep playing games and things get messy." Messy. That wasn't a plea. It was a threat. I glanced at the SUV and my mirror. Time to lose them. I spotted a gas station ahead and swerved into it, pulling up to a pump like I was just filling up. The SUV slowed, then parked at the lot's edge. Two figures inside. I couldn't make them out, but my gut screamed trouble. Instead of grabbing the pump, I walked toward the convenience store, head down, stealing a glance at the SUV as I passed. Dad was in the passenger seat, face twisted with rage. The driver, mid-40s, bald, stone-cold expression, was scanning the lot like a hawk. Who the hell was this guy? I ducked into the store, grabbed a random bag of chips and paid cash, watching them through the window. They didn't move, just waited. I texted Sophie, "Dad's following me with some bald guy." "Who is he?" Her reply was instant. "Oh God, that's Uncle Greg's friend Vince." Does sketchy stuff bill collector maybe worse? My stomach dropped. Worse, I texted back, "Tell me everything." She replied, "Not sure, but he solves money problems." Not legally. Not legally. Great. My parents weren't just desperate, they'd brought in muscle. I walked back to my car, keeping my pace steady like I hadn't clocked them. I sat inside, keys in hand, and thought fast. If they were willing to sick some shady enforcer on me, this wasn't about talking. They wanted to scare me, maybe corner me into paying again. Another text from Dad. "Last chance, Nathan." I ignored it, started the engine, and peeled out, making a sharp right, then another. The SUV scrambled to keep up, but I had the edge in traffic. I wove through side streets, my heart pounding. Up ahead, I spotted a police station. Perfect. I whipped into the parking lot, parked right by the entrance, and waited. The SUV cruised by, slowed, then kept going. I let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, thought so. They weren't bold enough to pull anything here. But as I sat there gripping the wheel, I knew this was just a pause. They'd try again. Sophie texted, "They're pissed you ditched them." Mom's on the phone again, freaking out. I grinned, but it faded when her next message hit Nathan. "They're planning something worse. Mom told Dad if they can't scare you, they'll make sure you have no choice but to come back." No choice? My mind raced. What did that mean? I texted back, "What are they doing, Sophie?" "Not sure, but they're talking to a lawyer." A lawyer. My chest tightened. Then it hit me. Years ago, they'd roped me into co-signing a car loan and a joint credit card, swearing they'd handle it. I was 19, naive, desperate for their approval. What if they were weaponizing those now, racking up debt, pinning it on me? Or worse, faking an eviction from their house, claiming I owed rent. I'd already paid. They could tank my credit, make it impossible to rent again. I wasn't just running from them, I was running from a trap. I couldn't sit still. They weren't going to stop, and I wasn't going to wait for their next move. My parents were ready to ruin me legally, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I sat in my car outside the police station, the adrenaline from ditching that SUV still buzzing in my veins. Sophie's text about a lawyer had my mind spinning. A lawyer meant they weren't just chasing me, they were plotting to cage me. I thought back to those co-signed accounts, the ones I'd stupidly agreed to when I was younger, desperate to prove I was a good son. A car loan, a credit card, things they swore they'd handle. Now I saw it, those were leverage ticking time bombs they could detonate to trap me financially. I drove straight to the bank, my knuckles white on the wheel. At the counter, I told the teller I needed to sever any ties to joint accounts and lock down my credit. She typed, then gave me a look that made my gut clench. "There was an attempt to open a loan in your name yesterday." "A big one." I froze. "Was it approved?" She shook her head. "No, they didn't have the right verification, but they tried multiple times." My jaw tightened. It was them, no question. They were trying to bury me in debt, make me so desperate I'd crawl back. I shut it all down, froze old accounts, yanked my name off anything tied to them, set up fraud alerts. As I left, my phone buzzed. "Sophie, Mom and Dad are losing it. They just realized the bills didn't get paid this month." I smirked. Good. Let them feel the squeeze. Then her next text wiped the grin off my face. "Nathan, they're talking about filing something against you. Be careful filing what I texted back." "Find out exactly what they're planning." She replied, "I'll try, but they're unhinged. Mom's screaming about making you pay." I stood in the parking lot, my breath shallow. Eviction, it had to be. Even though I'd moved out, they could fake a lease agreement, claim I owed back rent, or say I'd abandoned the room I'd paid for. On paper, it could look real enough to screw my credit, maybe even blacklist me from renting. Or worse, they could weaponize those old accounts, claim I'd defaulted. I'd seen them twist the truth before, like when they blamed me for ruining their vacation because I couldn't cover the hotel. This was that lie, but on steroids. I wasn't waiting for their next punch. I drove to a lawyer's office, one I'd found online with solid reviews. The attorney, Ms. Harper, leaned back in her chair as I spilled everything: 6 years of paying their bills, the rent they charged me while Sophie lived free, the public humiliation, their attempted fraud, the chase with that sketchy Vince guy. Her pen scratched notes fast. When I mentioned the lawyer they'd hired, she raised an eyebrow. "If they try to evict you after you've left, it won't hold up. And if they're committing fraud with your name, you've got grounds to press charges." I exhaled, a weight lifting. "So they can't touch me?" She nodded. "Not if you stay ahead of them." I left her office feeling like I could breathe again. For years, I'd been their punching bag, tiptoeing around their tempers. At 15, I'd hide in my room when Dad's rants shook the walls, promising myself I'd escape one day. Now I had, and they were scrambling. But as I reached my car, my phone buzzed. Sophie, Nathan. They're freaking out. They told Grandma you stole from them. I rolled my eyes. Of course they'd spin that lie. Then her next text hit like a brick. They know where you live. They're on their way. My chest seized. How I texted back. Sophie, I don't know, but they left 20 minutes ago. Dad's raging, Mom's crying about making you pay. I stared at the screen. They'd probably combed through my old mail, pieced together enough to track my new place. Or maybe Vince, that bald creep, had done the legwork. I didn't wait to find out. I drove toward my apartment but parked a block away, hiding in plain sight. I wasn't running again. I wanted to see this play out. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, a black SUV rolled up to my building. Dad, Mom, and Vince climbed out. Dad marched to my door and pounded on it, screaming, "Nathan, get out here," Mom sobbed. "How could you do this to us?" Vince just stood there, arms crossed, scanning the street like a hired thug. I pulled out my phone and hit record, my heart pounding but steady. This was evidence. Dad's fist slammed the door again, then he kicked it hard. The wood splintered. I grinned. Got you. I dialed 911, my voice calm. As I explained harassment, trespassing, property damage. As I spoke, I watched them rage, oblivious to the storm coming. That's when I realized they'd never stop unless I made them. I watched my parents unravel as the cops shut them down, but freedom came with a price. Dad was still pounding on my apartment door, his screams echoing down the street. "Nathan, you coward! Face us!" Mom wailed. "We need you. How could you abandon us?" Vince, the bald goon, stood like a statue, eyes sweeping the block. I crouched in my car a block away, phone recording every second Dad's fists. Mom's theatrics, the splintered door from his kick. Evidence, all of it. My heart thumped, not with fear but with clarity. This was their last stand and I was ready. I'd already called 911, voice steady as I reported harassment, trespassing, and property damage. Now I waited, watching the circus unfold. Dad kicked the door again, roaring about my betrayal. Mom clutched her purse, sobbing like she was auditioning for a soap opera. I thought back to all the times they'd turned on the waterworks to guilt me, when I hesitated to pay their cable bill, when I dared ask why Sophie got a free ride. Same act, bigger stage. Red and blue lights flashed as 2 cop cars pulled up. My parents froze. I stepped out of my car, phone still recording, and walked toward the scene. Dad's face twisted when he saw me. "There he is," he shouted, pointing. "He stole from us, left us broke," Mom chimed in, tears streaming. "He's our son, but he's ruined us." The cops didn't flinch. "One," a grizzled guy with a notepad raised a hand. "Calm down. Let's hear it." I didn't hesitate. "Officers, I moved out yesterday after they told me not to come back. I've got proof, texts, threats, even them trying to open loans in my name." I showed my phone. Mom's, "Don't come back." Text Dad's, "Things get messy," threat, the bank's fraud alerts, and now the video of Dad trashing my door. They've been harassing me, following me, and just tried to break in. The cop watched the video, his jaw tightening as Dad's kick played. He turned to my parents. "Sir, ma'am, you need to leave. Now." Dad's face went purple. "He's our son. He owes us." The cop didn't blink. "He doesn't owe you his money. And if you try this again, it's trespassing or worse." Mom crumpled, clutching Dad's arm. "But we raised him." The cop's voice was ice. "That doesn't give you a claim to his life." Vince, silent the whole time, slunk back to the SUV. No loyalty there, just a hired hand who knew the gig was up. The cops escorted my parents to their car, Mom still sniffling. Dad muttering curses. As they drove off, I caught Dad's glare through the window, pure venom. I didn't look away. For the first time, I wasn't the scared kid ducking his temper. I was done. Back in my apartment, I sank onto the couch, the adrenaline draining. My phone buzzed. "Sophie. They're back home ranting, but I think they're done. Cops spooked them." I typed back, "Good." She added, "Nathan, I'm sorry I didn't say anything at the party." I was scared they'd turn on me too. I stared at her words. Part of me wanted to snap. She'd sat there sipping her drink while they humiliated me. But I got it. Growing up, she'd seen what happened when you crossed them. I replied, "Just keep me posted if they try anything." She sent a thumbs up. I leaned back, staring at the cracked ceiling. 6 years of carrying their weight, of shrinking myself to fit their demands. I remembered nights at 17 sneaking out to avoid Dad's drunken rants, promising myself I'd break free. Now I had. But as the quiet settled, a hollow ache crept in. They were my family, twisted as they were. Cutting them off meant cutting that tie forever. Freedom, yeah, but it stung. Then Sophie texted again. "They're telling everyone you're the villain. Grandma's buying it." I laughed bitter. Of course they were spinning the story, but it didn't matter. I had the truth, the evidence, and a lawyer ready to bury them if they tried again. I wasn't their ATM anymore. I wasn't their punching bag. I was free. So Reddit AITA for walking away and letting them crash. Story 2. Mom sent me an SMS. "You've always been challenging. The locks are being changed." "Stay away," I said. "Make a copy of that. However, you may want to look at the solar panels." I then put the $21,000 debt back in their names and stopped the autopay. They received a clean warning via email from the solar provider. Then came their lawyer. The house could be at risk. It was too late, so I never replied. 3 weeks after I helped them out of foreclosure, it began 6 days later. Yes, foreclosure. The bank had previously issued a last warning and there were 3 mortgage payments past due. My dad continued to behave as though the bank was bluffing, and it wasn't a huge concern. However, one evening after I left work, my mother phoned me in tears. I knew what she wanted, even though she didn't ask me outright. The next morning, I sent the money. Also 200 is gone. No inquiries were made. It was not the first instance. I've always been helpful. Utility payments, groceries, and gas money. Hell, when the old dishwasher broke down in the middle of its cycle last Thanksgiving, I purchased them a new one. They never expressed gratitude to me. Not at all. As was to be expected, it was always dismissed, as if boys were meant to do just that. Then the dispute arose. Over the hallway light it began. I arrived home late and left it on. "We're not running a hotel," my mother remarked. Dad then intervened. Brought up everything including my attitude and the length of time I've lived there. Said that by being nearby I was acting as though I was helping them. I didn't even dispute it. I simply walked to my room and shut the door behind me. Assumed they were under stress. I received the SMS the next morning. As simple as that. "You've always been challenging. The locks are being changed. Avoid it." No phone call. Not a warning. No. Let's have a conversation. Just that I was in the hospital on my break, I'm exhausted and already on fumes. I simply spent some time staring at the computer after reading that. I'm not shocked. That's right. More numb. So I answered. "Make a copy of that. However, you may want to look at the solar panels." That was it. They had desired solar panels a year and a half prior, claimed that it would increase the house's value and reduce costs. Only issue. Their reputation was ruined. Failed to receive approval, so they questioned me. Said it will benefit the impoverished family, that they would pay for it. The lease was signed by me, $123 each month. My card is set up to pay automatically. After 4 months, they ceased making payments. I remained silent. As usual, I just covered it. I received the SMS that same day. I canceled the autopay after logging into Sandwich's site. I then asked to have the lease transferred back into their names. It was 4 days before I heard anything. The first email notification of non-payment was then sent to them. $21,000 is still due. Starting a lien process. Their attorney sent them an email 2 days later. He wrote that this may cost the home. They were alarmed. They did, of course. Began phoning members of the family, portraying myself as the antagonist. Informed them of my instability. Bitter, seeking retribution for being expelled. They omitted the portion in which they pleaded with me to assume their obligation before abandoning me like trash. I didn't answer, not to them, not to the attorney, not all the way to the finish. Who sent the text? How are things doing with your folks? Since I was well aware of what was taking place. For the first time, the mask was coming loose. Aside from me, someone was discovering their true selves, and it was only the start. It was more than a threat by the end of the week. The line was genuine. In the county records filed and stamped, Sandra wasted no time. The instant I reverted the lease to their names when the payment ceased. They did what they were told. The mortgage firm raised a red flag as a result. Nearly instantly. 3 weeks prior to the lease notice being sent to them and mailed to the residence, I rescued them out of the same mortgage firm. Their lawyer attempted to contact me within 2 hours, so I knew the time. Victor is his name. My dad had several friends back when they believed that networking was important. "Andrew, this could cost your parents their home," he said in his message. "You must give me a call back." I didn't. Not for petty reasons. I simply failed to see the purpose. They made it apparent that I was no longer family. Why would I answer a call with their issues? I said nothing. Allow the consequences of their own decisions to weigh on them. I was sleeping at Uncle Dennis's house in the meanwhile. Dennis now. They all like to forget about him. Exists until they require a remedy. He owns his house outright, operates a little plumbing company out of his garage, drives a beat-up old Ford with a shattered windshield, and stays to himself. He has always been despised by my mother, said to be unambitious, but he just asked, "You want the couch or the guest room?" when they ejected me and everything went topsy-turvy. Didn't request a narrative. While I was at Dennis's, I didn't request rent. Without becoming engaged, I monitored the fallout. At least my mom's side cousin called to let me know that things were becoming nasty. In an attempt to pretend that they were simply going through a difficult time, my parents had begun phoning relatives and requesting money. They only made a passing reference to property taxes and a poor investment without mentioning the lien or the solar lease. They even attempted to convey that they were concerned about me and that I was having a mental breakdown. The failed to function. She's intelligent. She recalled how her mother had disparaged Dennis behind his back even when she was using his assistance for free. She also recalled how they viewed me as a spare part that they might utilize at any time during my childhood. The next action, the desperate one, came next. Tom was sent to Dennis's home. Tom, who works in real estate and drives a rented BMW, is one of Dad's favorites. He always comes up out of the blue to check in, acting as like he's too busy to finish a statement. Stated that he wished to discuss the family. He was not even allowed to pass the porch by Dennis. Instructed him to go and not return until he brought food for the evening. Dennis had 2 of his tires cut. 2 clean punctures and a corroded folding knife thrown next to the driveway, no message. They made no effort to conceal it. At first, Dennis remained silent. The next day, he mounted cameras and simply repaired the tires himself. However, I could see it affected him. Not because of the harm, but because it implied that the individuals we were interacting with were not just in need but also careless. I knew he believed it was them or someone they put up with, even though he never stated it out. And I concurred. Then I experienced a change. I'd been reacting till that point. Observing, awaiting. I was prepared to act now. It's okay if they choose to escalate this. I was aware of stuff they had been attempting to conceal for years. Legal short routes and financial secrets. Debts. They moved about as if they were cards at a rig table. I became the antagonist because of them, so I made the decision to become one. The mortgage firm was now reviewing the residence. Furthermore, the solo line was no longer the only focus. A reevaluation had been prompted by the line. Missed payments, late fines, paperwork, and mysterious financial activity were discovered. What other documentation did the bank want my parents to provide? Tell me, at least. There was enough terror in the home to choke on. I didn't have to do any work. They were falling apart by themselves. Uncle Dennis, however, maintained his composure. I could tell he was keeping watch, yet he continued working as if nothing had happened. Added a second camera to the rear gate. Install motion-activated lights along the walkway. The man's silent movements when he knows what's about to happen, but is reluctant to express it aloud. Then everything got out of hand once more. My parents had begun phoning relatives who weren't even in the country, according to the police call. Relatives in Ontario. An aunt in Puerto Rico requested loans, claiming that I had committed some sort of fraud and that they risked losing the house. That's what they called it. Deception. Only issue. It wasn't deception. All of my actions were recorded and authorized within the parameters of the lease. When the principal lessee ceases to make payments, liability is transferred. That's a policy. Every payment I made on their behalf was also documented. Bank statements, confirmation emails, and receipts, all connected to my account and identity. I printed it all out. Each page. I sent Richter, their attorney, a copy along with a message that said, just in case they forgot this. Just documentation, no return address, no signature. It was silent for 3 days after that. Completely quiet. Then I received an SMS from an unfamiliar number. It was my father. Most likely a burner phone. It stated that we must speak in person. Don't bring Dennis along. I didn't answer. Instead, I contacted Jesse, a coworker of mine. He was a cop once. He now consults on security. I questioned him about what would occur if a line in a mortgage agreement activated a default provision. The bank will demand full resolution if they see a risk of non-payment, he stated. Your parents are done if they are unable to pay. I had that thought. I then began to push. I was aware that my father had an unreported side company. He took on little building jobs for money, never filed an IRS report. But he maintained records, negative ones, kept them in his previous laptop, the one he believed I was unable to access. However, he never updated the password after I serviced that machine once. I signed in, took screenshots of everything, and emailed copies to the IRS whistleblower hotline in an anonymous manner. I didn't want them damaged, since I desired to corner them. They had repeatedly assaulted the one person who had saved them, lied to the family, and played the victim. Now that there were no more lifelines, it was time to observe their behavior. And it was successful. At least they informed me they were rushing by the end of the week. My dad's old buddy, whom I had never even met, called Dennis. The man claimed to have been requested to provide them with a bridge loan, but he was curious about the true situation. Dennis bluntly told him, "Don't. They're a complete mess. They constructed themselves." Dennis's apartment had a window broken that same evening. Nothing was taken. Didn't even enter the building. Simply ran after smashing the glass. This time, Dennis phoned the police, submitted a report, showed them the camera's footage. We recognized the walk even though the man was wearing a mask and sweatshirt. Tom was the one. Dennis remained silent. Just shook his head after staring at the video for a while. "They won't stop," he declared. "Not until everything is on fire." And once the window was smashed, I believe he was correct. Dennis evolved. Not loudly, simply more silent. Be more cautious. His phone was off when he went to sleep. By the door, he kept a crowbar. I didn't inquire about his fear. I could see the stress in his jaw as he locked up for the night, but he never confessed. My parents, meanwhile, were falling apart. Their mortgage was technically in default because to the lien. Code for the notification of intent to accelerate the loan was sent by the lenders. Foreclosure is on the horizon. Elise obtained a copy from her mother, who received it from my mother, who at last broke down and began sobbing on the phone. She didn't weep when they ejected me for the first time in years. But all of a sudden, there were phone calls, tears, and phony humility because the house was in danger. The family gathering was set up by Elise. Stated that enough was enough. Stated that we needed to speak. Despite our reluctance, Dennis and I went. I was interested in how far they would go, in part because Elise asked. The Sunday afternoon gathering took place at Lydia's home neutral ground. On the garden, everyone is seated on plastic chairs as though it were a cookout. However, no one was eating. Everyone became silent as we got there. Mom appeared to have been sleep-deprived for days. Dad refused to look at me. Furthermore, the first thing she said wasn't, "I apologize." Indeed, they were. All of this has been exaggerated beyond recognition. They didn't mean to interrupt me, she claimed, trying to twist it. They were just under pressure that my expulsion was the result of a misunderstanding. Dad claimed that by bringing up the lease, I overreacted. I at least prevented them from getting very far. She got to her feet and read the note aloud. The IRS answer letter I got was then reviewed by her. Based on the material that was given, they were initiating a preliminary investigation. She was aware that I had access, but she was unaware that I was the sender. Everything detonated at that point. My folks went into a frenzy. Dad yelled. Mom sobbed once again. I was accused of attempting to destroy them, of desiring them to be homeless, claimed to have manipulated me. I was poisoned against them by Dennis. At the very least, silenced Tom right away when he tried to speak. She had seen the security video. He was no longer able to deny it. Then, without warning, the rest of the family began to turn. Slowly, not all at once. Lydia, who seldom got involved with drama, questioned my parents about why they kept the lien a secret. Uncle Greg questioned why he was being asked for money, but he did not mention that the home may be confiscated. Even Aunt Rosa, who once vowed that Dad was infallible, regarded them as though she had just noticed something. Dennis remained silent the whole time. When everything was finished, he simply watched. Elise drew me aside and revealed something unexpected. The remaining sum on the lease would be paid by her and Greg. For the house's sake, not for my parents. They did not want a lender to seize the family home. Sandra is paid directly by them. Cleaned their own apartment after clearing the lien till my parents paid them back in full. It was flawless and brutal. Dennis gave me a drink and cooked burgers that evening. Said that I appeared to have seen a ghost. I informed him that since I hadn't won anything, I didn't feel like I had. Not quite yet. That Tuesday, the payment was processed. The entire sum was sent straight to Sundried by Greg and Elise. By the morning of Thursday, the queue was free. As simple as that. The foreclosure danger vanished. The appearance of sympathy, however, did the same. Greg did more than simply pay off the loan. He had his own clean agreement drafted by his lawyer, on his and Elise's behalf this time. It was sealed. Greg would attempt to claim a portion of the property if my parents failed to make even one payment toward the $21,000. To quarrel, my parents were to stand. All of a sudden, they had no control over anything. They tricked the family into believing they were the victims for years. Now, however, the mask was removed. Greg even made it clear that he would take them to court if they ever approached him for money again without complete openness. Then the actual blow struck. An investigator, not the police, called Uncle Dennis, federal. One of my dad's underhanded jobs had been reported by the IRS. He allegedly completed a roofing deal off books 6 months ago. After being audited, the person who hired him removed his father's identity in order to save himself. It was sufficient for them to launch a legal case when combined with the documentation I presented. Dennis inquired about my knowledge about it. I told the truth. "They're going to drown in the hole they dug," he remarked, simply nodding. However, the most surprising event occurred 2 days later, a fire in their garage rather than their home. It began late at night. Half the garage burned up, but no one was harmed. I didn't believe the fire brigade when they said it was electrical. All of their old documents were preserved for their records. Dad could have gone into a panic. Perhaps he lost control when attempting to burn anything. Or perhaps it was done by someone else to frighten them. No one could be certain. The insurance company declined to pay. No inspection was documented for the alleged recent repair, and the wiring had not been up to code. It all fell apart at that point. They returned to the family, but this time, they accused everyone, blaming Dennis for turning Andrew against us, accusing Elise of leaking their private secrets, and accusing Greg of taking their house. I even got a voicemail from them. "We should never have trusted you," my mother replied in an angry tone. "We never had you, never ours, as if I were a stray." They regretted picking it up. Dennis and I listened to it together before deleting it. The IRS, the money, or the fire weren't the worst, though. It was the handwritten note that Dennis had received at his home. An inexpensive envelope, too. No address for return. Only one piece of paper. It said you ought to have passed away rather than your father. When Dennis read it, his expression remained fixed. After giving it to me, he went outside into the yard. Remained there for a while, simply gazing at the street. Remained silent for the remainder of the evening. I discovered something after reading the letter, and it completely transformed my life. Money was no longer the issue. This had nothing to do with Pride the house or the lease. All of their lives were filled with rot, deep, ancient decay. And perhaps, just possibly, they were starting to smell it. But atonement. They still didn't seem capable to me. There were 3 peaceful weeks. Strange long days without any major explosions. There were no messages received. No unexpected tire changes or late-night calls from unknown numbers. It didn't seem right. The sort of quiet that follows a tornado when everything has been leveled, and it's impossible to determine if the worst has already occurred or whether another one is imminent. Next, Elise texted, "They just want to speak with Lydia's family. The message is not dramatic, there is no pressure. Just a declaration." I showed up, but I didn't respond. Dennis also showed up. I believe he thought I shouldn't enter by myself, even if the nature of the conflict had changed. Lydia's home also had the same appearance as before. Thick drapes, a faded couch, and old coffee on the stove. When we arrived, everyone was already there. Like they were at church again, my parents sat side by side on the couch. Rosa was off to the side, quiet for once, while Greg and Elise stood across from them, their arms folded. Lydia appeared poised to step in as she stood in the doorway of the kitchen. Dennis stood while I sat. Almost quickly, my mother began to speak. She expressed regret for the text, the loss, and their treatment of me. After all I had done for them, she stated things like how she had been practicing the solo release, the lies, and how she had kicked me out. This time she didn't weep. Her tone was bland and unwavering. After she apologized, my dad stepped in. I'd always been giving, and they were embarrassed by their actions, not realizing how terrible things had gone until it was too late. They stated that they were working with the IRS, that they were making monthly payments on schedule, that they were thankful to Greg and Elise for covering the lien, and that they would repay all of their debts. They even acknowledged that they had sent Tom to Dennis's, but they claimed it was an error and that they hadn't asked him to do anything. However, they had no business involving him. They went on to say that we have to reestablish our family because it is sacred. Everyone paid attention. Most of them seemed to be relocated. In fact, Elise appeared to be about to cry. Greg didn't. However, his jaw loosened and Rosa expressed her pride in them for accepting accountability. Even Lydia gave a hesitant nod as if she were prepared to pardon if the words were sincere. However, I sat there contemplating the voicemail. Mom said that I was never truly theirs, regarding the tires and the note Dennis received. Regarding the way my father used to stare at me when I brought food home from work as required, as if I owed them. And as they continued to speak, I came to further realizations. They had no regrets. They caused me pain. They regretted that the family witnessed them doing it. For what did they apologize? It was expensive, the cash. The house is on the verge of being seized. They lost control of the IRS, the change in power. Forgiveness was not what they want. They want repair. They wanted to return to the time when I was the son who paid without being asked, who remained silent, and who put up with the abuse because that's the way things are. My dad looked directly at me after it was over and said, "We hope you can forgive us." I didn't say anything, not intentionally, after glancing at him and then at my mother. Just clarification, as I've already watched this program. The act of repentance. The cleanup effort. The well-timed apologies were delivered with exactly the right amount of passion to restore the faith of those who were watching. I didn't. Dennis and I went out. In the car, we didn't speak. Not initially. "That wasn't for you," he muttered, turning off the engine as we arrived at his driveway. For them, that is. It was true, so I nodded. I pondered how things might end while sitting by myself in the guest room that evening. Not with justice and not with closure. Just a change in the way people act. I was aware that I would eventually receive another call. It may be a birthday greeting, a family celebration, or an urgent request for assistance. And since individuals like them never change, I might return here with an update. They do nothing except wait. Just one update. The duration was precisely 3 weeks. 21 days without speaking. For a minute, there should be no drama, no calls, no messages. I was on the verge of thinking they had finally abandoned me. I was mistaken. I received a letter on Friday. From the county, not my parents. A notification of the filing of a rapid claim deed, giving me a portion of the house's ownership. I believed it to be an error. I verified it by calling the clerk's office. Authentic filing. In my name, my dad had recorded a more than 25% ownership stake in the property, with instant effect. No heads up, no warning. Just legal documents arrived like a bomb at my door. Perhaps they were attempting to offer me something, I reasoned. Real estate is a kind of apology, however I was aware. So I looked further. Dennis assisted me in investigating the time, and I wasn't surprised by what we discovered. Their new repayment plan had been examined by their mortgage provider. They were pushed to do so by Greg and Elise, who determined that the house was still too hazardous unless they could demonstrate in plain English family co-ownership and steady financial status. To get the bank to back off, they wanted my name on the deed. They didn't ask over the phone. Didn't provide an explanation. I recently signed up. Most likely assumed I wouldn't resist. It was to be anticipated. I ought to have anticipated it. When my dad stated they hoped I could forgive them, he looked me in the eye. There was no regret in that sight. It was a calculation. However, this is the part that was unexpected. Dennis received the letter a few hours after I did. Dennis was included as a co-signer on a small company loan application that my dad never even filed, according to the lawyer who wrote it. Someone attempted to apply for a $30,000 line of credit using Dennis's identity and identification. Although they were rejected, a fraud warning was raised. Dennis had to be informed personally by the bank. Same time, same week. Dennis and I both reject the idea of coincidence. It isn't just about the home anymore. Today, it's criminal identity theft. Dennis reported it to the police. I requested that the attorney who assisted Greg with the clean agreement write a deed refusal. I didn't sign for it, never consented to it. I'm now requesting in court to have the ownership transfer revoked. So here we are once more. Once more, they attempted to destroy me. They made another attempt to employ Dennis. The fictitious apology was only a prelude to the subsequent performance. Their strategies were the only thing that altered. Less noisy, more intricate, but fundamentally the same. Right now, I'm more exhausted than furious. Fed up with cleaning up after them. I'm sick of trying to show people who they truly are. However, I'm also prepared. I'll be back if this turns out to be where I believe it will be. Story 3. The family excursion did not invite me. They said that paying for an additional seat was too costly. My brother later submitted a Venmo request. $100. Your portion of the buffet. For the air you will be consuming, I gave $1 along with a letter. After that, I reset all of the passwords for the streaming accounts they have had since 2019. My sister texted 40 minutes later. The TV is asking me who I am, but why I was completely unaware that they were organizing a vacation. My cousin uploaded a boomerang of my whole family, and that's how I found out. My whole family aboard a Lake Tahoe boat. Uncle Jack, wearing a neck brace, was smiling as if this were the goddamn royal wedding, as were their parents Ethan, Melanie, and their children. All but me. For a whole minute, I gazed at the film, struggling to comprehend what I was even seeing. Perhaps that was from last year, I thought, or perhaps they were simply reposting. The timestamp that was submitted an hour ago caught my attention. Melanie tagged the place. Yearly family vacation, every year. When did it start? To find out why I wasn't invited, I phoned my mother directly. No introduction. Her response, "Well, it's not personal, Toby. Simply enough, we couldn't afford an additional seat. Only a set amount of people can sleep in the cottages. You are also aware of the current high cost of flying." Correct. The spare seat. As if I were a hefty luggage. Nobody was interested in checking in. Dylan was flown in from Oregon. They had Melanie's dog with them. Later on, I learned that they even hired a private chef for one evening. However, I broke the budget. I didn't shout. I refrained from arguing. I remained silent. They were truly at ease because of that. As previously, they thought I would remain silent. When they pretended that I was the family in turn or excluded me from decision-making. Ethan sent me a Venmo request the next morning. No justification. Only $1,600. Your portion of the meal. The cuisine, the meal from the vacation to which I was not invited, that I did not consume. I looked at the request as if it were a joke. Kutcher appeared to be ready to jump out from behind a potted plant just like Ashton. I sent him just $1. For the aerial, the note read, "Take a breath." After that, I started working. You see, I have a family package that covers all of the streaming services for the family, including Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Disney+, and even Spotify Premium. Helping individuals who believe I'm not even worthy of a stinking foldable chair while on vacation is something I don't mind doing. No. I renamed Ethan's profiles to enjoy the stillness, changed all of the passwords logged out of every device, and enabled two-factor authentication. Melanie doesn't appear for the phony sisters. My folks were just not invited. The first ripple struck less than an hour later. I got an SMS from Melanie. The TV is asking me who I am, but why I didn't answer. After 5 minutes, there was complete stillness, followed by 2 calls from Ethan and a missed call from Dad. As if they were gathering themselves, attempting to determine whether I was serious. The next thing that happened surprised me. Melanie sent the incorrect chat a screenshot. Mom was supposed to get it. She emailed it to me instead. Family Real 1 was the name of the brand new group chat. It didn't include me. Each and every one. Mom, Dad, Melanie, Ethan, and cousins. To organize things, Uncle Rick had even set up a group chat. Make a joke. Exchange pictures. A conversation designed to exclude me. That genuine one was the name they gave it. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch at all. But a silent, lasting thing snapped inside of me. Similar to the sound of a lock switching. They had persuaded themselves that I only played a supporting role in their lives. Beneficial, not required, invisible, weren't. They also assumed that I would continue to appear as usual. They were mistaken. And I wasn't just going to vanish without a trace this time. I was going to retract something this time. When I started, they were still traveling. I had no intention of waiting for them to return home. Why ought I to? They said I was never really a member of the family. I terminated the common Costco membership as my first action. My mother was the principal cardholder, but I paid for it. Switching the account and obtaining a new digital card in my name alone took me 2 minutes. After that, I looked at my Amazon account. Ethan had been taking use of my Prime membership for free delivery for years, as it turned out. Every address that wasn't mine was deleted. I changed the password for each payment method to something lengthy, unsightly, and unusable since I didn't recognize it. I then began making phone calls. Their home security system was another something I had been paying for. The whole Nest configuration. Mine. At first, it was a gift. After a break-in 2 years ago, I got my parents. I returned ownership to myself and phone support. If they wanted it to function once again, they would need to restore everything. Witnessing them solve it in real time was the most fulfilling aspect. Melanie shared a tale from the lake on social media. All that was visible was a black screen covered with letters. Why isn't anything in the field working? That meant precisely what I knew. I looked at my email. Seriously was the subject of an email that Ethan had sent. The one that truly got me arrived 2 days later, but I didn't open it. I got a call from Uncle Rick. I never get a call from him. "Do you have a minute?" he said. "Listen, Toby, I didn't realize you weren't invited," he remarked. "We didn't. We simply thought you would arrive later." I said very little. Simply listen. Rick is an ex-police officer. When drama arises, the family sort of acts as its unofficial judge. I've never previously caught his attention. He said that when he challenged my father about it, my father told him the same thing. Too costly. Too many individuals have to make decisions. Rick, however, didn't believe it. He bluntly informed me that I had no option. Your household. I took a moment to consider that. Then I heard something unexpected from Rick. He informed me that he didn't feel well and that he would be leaving early. When he saw I was excluded, he stayed. Said it didn't look good. Claimed it was awful. He wasn't alone either. The following morning, my cousin Jenna DM'd me. She was furious when Uncle Rick told her the same thing. She claimed that because I was too preoccupied with work, my parents had informed everyone that I had chosen not to go on the trip. They went with that and I decided not to go. People were beginning to notice that they were lying. The atmosphere had changed by the time they arrived home. Ethan remained enraged. My parents were quiet despite Melanie's attempts to play peacekeeper. Too silent. I waited. I was curious to find out how long it would take them to mention it. They were just there for a day. The doorbell then rang. My dad was standing there with a Tupperware container and a fake smile when I opened it. The trip's leftover tri-tip. I didn't take it, he said. Just stood there and stared at him, he continued. Perhaps we could have a conversation. When he was able to explain the true reason they excluded me, I told him to return. He didn't dispute. He just strolled back to his car after leaving the meal on the porch. I kept it out of the house. I didn't feel hungry. They pretended nothing had happened when they returned from the excursion. The group conversation is similar to the boat photographs, the shutdown of streaming. Uncle Rick's call. It never existed. That week, my mother even gave me a call to ask if I could visit and assist her in configuring her new iPad. I claimed to be busy. That's okay, she responded after pausing. Next week, perhaps? Before I could respond, she hung up. I wasn't finished, but next week never arrived. Not even close. Their group chat was still active. Jenna emailed me screenshots, but I was unable to view anything. The messages were still about me, even if they had changed the name from Family Real 1-2 Trip Chat. Do you think Toby will try to destroy Christmas now, Melanie? Ethan. It seems that he is too petty to terminate Spotify, but not petty enough to even speak to us. I'm laughing, Mama. Let's simply concentrate on remaining optimistic. He is free to sequester himself if he so chooses. Nothing was written by my father. However, when it's his idea, he never does. He lets others do the explaining. I so made the decision to see how much they needed me. I proceeded to the storage area. My name was on it. My parents had been pleading with me to assist them with their downsizing since 2021. Everything they couldn't keep in the garage but didn't want to discard, including old papers, family treasures, and the majority of their holiday belongings. Everything was there. I offered them free use of the space. On a Saturday, I went there, took everything I had, and relocated it to a different apartment across town. After that, I sent the business an email instructing them to cease the rental by the end of the week. My mother left me a desperate voicemail 3 days later. Something about Melanie's party requiring Halloween decorations. The code for storing wasn't functioning. May I make sure I didn't return the call? It was not the end of the panic. My dad got an email from the HOA. It seems that for the last 8 months I had been responsible for paying the joint landscaping costs for their duplex. When I changed my billing information, they thought he had taken over. He hadn't. The $340 late fee was incurred. I sent him the invoice after making the payment. Then he gave me the memo and the money. I suppose that I owe you more than a seat. The extent to which I had been supporting the family's infrastructure was now beginning to become apparent. Then the true twist appeared. Ethan shared a travel shot that he hadn't previously shared. Everyone seated where I would have likely been with a stranger at the outside of the picture, with plates heaped high and wine pouring. A man by the name of Derek, someone Dylan's friend, apparently simply a friend who wants to spend the weekend away. Instead of me, they brought a stranger. I sent Jenna a message. She attested to it. Derek was in the rooms aboard the boat, even mentioned in a few personal pictures. A stranger took my seat. I refrained from crying. I didn't become angry. As I gazed at the TV, I assumed they genuinely believed this to be okay. I sent my mother a text message with a screenshot of it. Nothing to say, only the picture. It's not what it looks like, she said 10 minutes later. However it was precisely what it appeared to be. They assumed I wouldn't notice when they replaced me. Everything suddenly halted when I emailed my mom the picture of Derek. Nothing, no explanation, no follow-up, no frantic SMS. It was as though they all held their breath simultaneously and decided not to let go until I moved away. It was 3 days before I heard from anyone. Then, like a police officer on welfare, Ethan arrived to my flat. He didn't text or call, merely buzzed my door and appeared to be doing something admirable while standing there with his hands in his hoodie. I opened the door for him. I wanted to see how far he was going to carry the act, not because I wanted to converse. He entered as though the space belonged to him and stood there as though he was assessing the damage. He just stated, "Look, this got out of hand," without sitting or grinning. Everyone is angry. This has to be fixed. I remained silent while leaning on the counter. The family is in a strange situation. Mom hasn't been sleeping and Dad is trying to keep everything together, he began to say. Then he dropped what he likely believed to be the final sentence. Next week, Melanie is organizing a supper. Only the core family. No strangers, Derek numbered core family. I laughed at it. He wasn't prepared for the inquiry I posed to him. Before the trip, were you aware of Derek? He blinked, swallowed, claimed to have been added at the last minute. He was brought by Dylan. No one anticipated that it would be significant. I stated that no one believed that giving up my seat to a stranger would be a huge concern. He remained silent while glancing at the ground. I informed him that I had no desire to sit around a table and act as though there had been a miscommunication. I instructed him to return and pose this one query to our parents. Why was forgetting me so simple? Shortly thereafter, he departed. The deluge followed. Melanie reportedly attempted damage control in the group chat when Ethan returned and explained what had transpired. I received screenshots from Jenna once more. Melanie. He continues to be challenging despite our efforts to include him. Ethan. He has a drama addiction. He wants us to always feel awful. My dad eventually broke his silence after that. It has nothing to do with guilt. It's about being unable to continue a relationship with someone who harbors such a deep-seated resentment. Uncle Rick intervened at that point. This isn't about a grudge, he wrote. You all need to act as though nothing occurred. You replaced him after excluding him and lying about it. You want to punish him now for not moving on from it quickly enough? After an hour of silence, Jenna answered. He didn't leave himself out. For him, you did it. Now don't spin it. All of a sudden, the genuine family group conversation was not as authentic as they had assumed. Individuals were separating. Uncle Lou informed them that they owed me more than just an invitation to supper. Marcy, who often avoids conflict like it's a plague, said that they had to take responsibility for the harm. The fissures were widening. My phone rang that night with a message from a number that wasn't in my contacts. I nearly forgot to open it. The picture showed my mother clutching a manila package outside the building where I work. I received another buzz 5 minutes later, this time from my front desk. That was where she had left it. There was a $5,000 check and a handwritten message inside. Toby, we are aware of our obligations to you, but this is not all-inclusive. Not simply the cash, the room, the reality. Think of it as the beginning, please. 5,000. It's not a whole number, not a metaphor. Exactly. I was aware of it. Payment for all the years I handled last-minute crises, home costs, streaming, and storage. They reviewed everything, added it up, and made the payment. There was no apologies in that. It was an admission. And now, at last, they got something. The additional seat was never me. The basis was me. They recently became aware of how painful it was to stand without it. For 8 days, the checks remained on my counter. 5,000. Silence written in black ink, hefty and clean. I kept my hands off of it. I wanted them to bear the burden, knowing that even repaying what they owed would not be sufficient, not because I was debating whether or not to forgive them. My phone was almost silent throughout those days, but not really. Jenna texted me repeatedly. Nothing noteworthy. Simple stuff. For example, after Ethan attempted to lecture Uncle Rick about family devotion, you ought to have seen him. Or whether it's beneficial. Derek really irritated me. He said that our dinner was tasteless and packed his own travel seasoning. Actually, I laughed at that one. Melanie then sent an SMS. Only 2 words. Soon coffee. At first, I disregarded it. I then provided her with a time and location 2 days later. Neutral territory. Nothing with more than 4 ingredients was served at this tiny bistro. I knew right once that this wasn't about small conversation because she arrived early. She appeared worn out, as though she had been carrying this weight around for some time and was unsure of where to put it down. She ignored us both while she scribbled on a tablet with her youngest. No one spoke for long after we placed our order. She simply let it out after that. Told me how the entire family had persuaded themselves that I was the independent one, that I didn't enjoy social situations, and that even if they had invited me, I wouldn't have accepted. I couldn't be included without making things awkward, Ethan stated. It's not like he has children, that Dad remarked. It's not the same. We let ourselves believe leaving you out was the kind option, she added, giving me a direct look. I asked her whether she now thought that was true. No, she answered. It seemed like the simplest choice. Who invited Derek? I questioned her. I thought she would point the finger at Dylan once more. The first surprise came then. She claimed it was Dad. I blinked. What the thought of leaving the seat unoccupied made him uncomfortable. I reasoned that making use of the entire space would be more effective. Dad responded yes when Dylan named a buddy. He refused to discuss it even after I informed him it was a horrible idea. I sat in disbelief. The decision to fill my seat was made by my own father. It was not an impromptu error. It was an intentional, purposeful choice. I'm not sure why, but it made her worse. Not just forgotten. Changed to a simpler person. Someone be quiet. Someone disconnected. Melanie took a tiny packet from her pocketbook after noticing my response. It was slipped across the table by her. She responded, "It's not a check." I took it open. There was a picture inside. An actual printed photograph. One of the evenings for the group supper. Not the Instagram photo I saw. This one was unique. Derek was the only one not grinning. Off to the side was him. Not even within the frame. In full. Only an elbow and a shoulder. There was nobody seated at the table. The table was set for 13 and 13. I looked at it for a while. We assured ourselves that you would not be attending. But no one could sit in your seat, she continued. That had some effect. I won't claim that it resolved every issue, but it did alter the nature of the rage. Being ostracized wasn't the only thing at stake. It has to do with their fear of acknowledging their mistakes. Now I wanted to know what the plan was. What their true desires were. Melanie whispered, "Mom wants to prepare meals. Only a family. No outsiders. She requested that I properly invite you. No gimmicks. I had a parcel delivered that night. No label for returns. However, I recognized the handwriting. The key was inside my mom's. Not a word. Only one key to their house's front door. Last year, when they believed I wouldn't notice, they took it back and I replaced it. It wasn't until now that I realized. The actual one was dinged by the group chat that weekend. They had added me back. My dad sent the first message. Next Saturday, the family will have supper. No speeches, only food. For if you desire it. I didn't respond for a whole hour. I wrote after that. Melanie responded with a clapping emoji. Don't burn the steak. Mom is weeping in the kitchen, Ethan just stated. There was nothing more I said. However, I eventually deposited the check later that evening. The number was irrelevant. It was a gesture. They were aware that I was no longer the spare seat. The table never seemed full because of me. I kept my attendance at the dinner a secret. I let them to stew in the doubt. Let them arrange the table as you look at the vacant chair and consider whether or not I would show. To be honest, I hadn't made up my mind until I got inside the car. When I pulled up, the home appeared the same, but something was changed. All of the lights were on, overcompensating, as though they might make up for the darkness that had fallen between us. I approached the front door, took a moment to think, and then used the new key. It became clean. No opposition. The locks had not been changed once more. First came the odor. Roast beef, rosemary and garlic. When my mom wants to create a cozy, controlled atmosphere, this is her go-to supper. For a moment, nobody saw me stepping in. After that, I heard chairs moving. Silent voices wane. The first person to look me in the eye was Melanie. Next, my mother. She appeared to be attempting to hide the fact that she had been sobbing for hours. Once more, the table was arranged for 13. No one attempted to occupy my seat this time. Without saying anything, I took a seat. I didn't have to. At first, dinner was quiet. It was obvious that people were being extremely cautious. Even the children were quiet, as if they had always behaved well, or perhaps simply sensed the strain in the atmosphere. My dad got up with a glass of wine about the middle. I prepared myself. "We're not doing speeches," he responded, clearing his throat. Then he took a seat again. That caused a little chuckle. A smile even came to my face. We had some food. We conversed. The room gradually began to feel more familiar. However, I couldn't get rid of the uneasy sensation. The surface still had a fissure in it, as if someone had not been completely honest. Melanie grabbed me aside as others were getting up after dessert and told me, "There's something else you should know." I went to the garage after her. She took out a tiny binder from a cupboard at the rear wall. My name was on it. I was unaware of it. In Dad's office, I discovered something. I believe you ought to read it. When I opened it, I discovered years' worth of notes, emails, receipts, and other documents detailing all of my spending and purchases. Things I couldn't even recall. Accounts for streaming, Thanksgiving feasts, a 2020 plumbing bill. The registration of my parents' automobile was traced. All in the handwriting of my father. He had apparently been recording everything I did for them, silently. He never spoke, like if he had been keeping score. I believe he was always aware. According to Melanie, he simply didn't know how to express gratitude without feeling inadequate. I put the binder away and carried it under my arm as I made my way back inside. My father was drying the plate in the kitchen. The binder was placed on the counter by me. I witnessed it. I said, he gave a nod. Did not speak up. Then he said, "Toby, you were always there, even if we didn't inquire, particularly at that time." I ought to have said that earlier. I took a while to reply. I then questioned him, "Why Derek?" He let out a sigh. "Because I reasoned that perhaps this time it wouldn't matter. You could have outgrown us. You wouldn't even notice," I assured myself. I wasn't prepared for how hard that hit. It was nearly believable, not simply because it was pitiful. As if they had all persuaded themselves that I no longer gave a damn. Yes, I did notice. I said. After nodding once again, he uttered something I never would have expected to hear. "I'm happy you caused pain." It wasn't arrogant at all. The simple truth. As if he knew it was inevitable. I didn't give him a hug. It would have been excessive. However, before leaving, I went to get my coat and left the binder on the counter. My mother gave me a dish that was completely wrapped. I prepared extra for tomorrow. The meal wasn't the point. Having something to offer me at the entrance was the main goal. "Keep the table set for 13, I replied as I turned. She grinned as though she would burst into tears once again. She then gave a nod. I knew that this time the door would remain open and that my seat would be empty, so I walked out without turning around.